Oh, hello. My name is Stephen Nelson, and I'm Dean of the Center for Advanced Study in the Visual Arts here at the National Gallery of Art. And I'm delighted to welcome all of you to our third lecture by Anna Deavere Smith, Chasing That Which Is Not Me, Chasing That Which Is Me. We're really thrilled to have you with us this afternoon. And let's bring Anna Deavere Smith to the stand.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming on Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. If you're a mother, would you applaud so we know how many mothers are in the house? Thank you, Stephen Nelson, Kaywin Feldman, Kyra Cabanas, Gary Calgano, Sarah Battle, Jen Rakoski, Theo, and Jamal, for your continued hospitality and patience with having an actress in an environment where most works of art don't talk. That was for you, Stephen. This lecture is dedicated to Dr. Kirsta Kurtz-Burke, MD. This, the third lecture in the series, will include photographs by Diana Walker. For this lecture, I reviewed anew photographs that Diana has made while traveling with me or even in rehearsal rooms. I'm astonished by the piercing intelligence with which she sees, the psychoanalytic intelligence with which she sees. Yet at the moment that the photograph could become an indictment, she eases off with grace. The particularity in Diana's work can be humorous, beautiful, or profound. Particularity can save us from generalizing, stereotyping, stigmatizing, racializing, washing over. Generalizing can be lethal, as some of you may discern at certain points in my lecture today. Particularity can be enthralling. I'll never forget the day I looked carefully at the grains of sand on a beach in Big Sur. Underneath the wash of beige, there were so many colors. The particular can be ugly, it can be disturbing, but there's a chance that particularity will reveal beauty, and beauty is life-saving. Quoting Elaine Scarry, who's quoting St. Augustine. Beauty is life-saving. Previously on Chasing That Which Is Not Me, Chasing Which Is Me, I told audiences that my paternal grandfather, Deaver Young Smith Sr., born in 1890, who started a coffee and tea business in 1906 by standing on corners in Baltimore with a basket of tea, imparted wisdom that shaped my work as a dramatist. He said, if you say a word often enough, it becomes you. I've been trying to become America word for word, using recording devices, learning what people actually say, including broken sentences and incomplete words. I've tried to put myself in other people's words, the way one might metaphorically put oneself in other people's shoes. I've been especially interested in people who are very different from me and who do not share my opinions. I'm inspired by the landscape of America and by the unending variety of sounds and melodies in everyday speech, the sound and space of America. I love broken sentences and repeated words. They signify thought, not as content, but as time, and potentially leave room for character. Incomplete sentences have humility. They make language sing. This I learned in conservatory when we approached Shakespeare, no matter what you think about the hold that Europe still has on our culture. Shakespeare, if nothing else, was a drill for developing vocal and linguistic nuance. Chasing That Which Is Not Me, Chasing That Which Is Me is about relationships in the creation of identity. Today, I'm going to start with me. We'll be here together for about over an hour. Is that okay? If you were here last week and you met my Aunt Esther, my mother's oldest sister, just applaud so I know if you were here. Okay. Okay, so Aunt Esther is the person who brought me home from the hospital after I was born, and she would tell me this. It was raining cats and dogs, and I just loved that Aunt Esther was so expressive, and so that's why she was one of the first people I interviewed, as some of you know. As I said, my work was inspired by my grandfather. If you say a word often enough, it becomes you. It's also inspired by a linguist who I met by chance. She told me that I could elicit unique melodies, rhythms, and sounds from everyday people by asking them one of these three questions. If you've been here already and you remember the questions or parts of them, just say them along with me. Number one, have you ever come close to death? Number two, have you ever been accused of something that you did not do? Three, do you know the circumstances of your birth? Very good. My birth answered all three of those questions. And I actually never thought of that until preparing for these lectures. One, do you know the circumstances of your birth? My mother was in labor for 5 days. I came down the birth canal and turned back up. Two, did you ever come close to death? Probably. While being born, probably myself and my mother came close to death. Number three, were you ever accused of something you did not do? Yes. I was born in Baltimore in a segregated era, and I was born at a very under-resourced all-Negro hospital. With better resources, neither I nor my mother would have suffered for 5 days. Aunt Lorraine, 4 years younger than my mother, was at Providence Hospital when they finally pulled me out with forceps. She said, when I was 46 years old, I still remember those little black marks on the side of your forehead. Aunt Lorraine is 96, and she is one of only two still alive from my parents' generation, my father having been one of 6, my mother one of 8. And this is word for word from a recorded interview of Aunt Lorraine in 2009. Much of today's lecture will be comprised of word for word excerpts from interviews. This is Aunt Lorraine, and this is called Gloves. Everything's going to have a title because, you know, people, they're so creative. When people would say to me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be like Esther. And, you know, growing up, I was Esther's baby. She took me like a little girl. She would buy me shoes. I don't think I ever got my pink socks. When I was little, all I used to talk about was I wanted white shoes and pink socks in the 30s. And you know, with 8 children, oh, I thought that Esther was hot stuff. The phone rings. I don't run for the phone anymore. When Esther was in the nursing home, the last thing I heard her say, she was in the hospital, and I don't think that I could converse with her. And she was just staring at me with those eyes. But as I turned to leave, she said, "You still got that big ass." And that was the last thing my sister ever said to me. You know, of course, at the time, I didn't know she was going to die. But when she did, I said to myself, just think, that's the last thing I heard my sister say. That's the last thing I remember. I was walking out the room, and she said, "You still got that big ass." That's the last thing I remember. That was the last thing I heard her say. You know one thing that I miss. When we were little, I didn't have gloves. But when we came home from school, Mother would be standing at the door, and she would put our hands underneath of her arms to make them warm. You know, I miss that. And when I lost my sweetie, your Uncle Clarence, and this lady, Miss Effie, She lived to be 104. And when Clarence died that Sunday, Michael and I went down to Union Baptist Church. So after church, when we were leaving, Miss Effie came over to me, and I said, "Oh, Effie, I wish my mother was here so I could put my hands under her arms." And Effie said, "Well, not your mother, but you can put your hands under my arms if you want to." And there are times when I get down. I wish I had my mother to put my hands under her arms. And that's my Aunt Lorraine, Mrs. Lorraine Coleman. I started with Aunt Lorraine's text to introduce themes of care, the polar opposite of care, kindness, and the polar opposite of kindness. That's what I'm going to explore today. Aunt Lorraine is represented in my play, Let Me Down Easy. Let Me Down Easy began as a visiting professorship at the Yale University School of Medicine in the late 90s. Before healthcare became a major part of the national conversation, I was invited by Dr. Ralph Horowitz, head of internal medicine, to interview doctors and patients about their relationships and to create a play based on those interviews and perform it at medical grand rounds. It was a kind of the play's the thing we're in sort of thing, because Dr. Horowitz thought that I would reveal, for example, the extent to which doctors don't listen. I was to be the mirror, and it was a very inspirational experience. It led me to think about the vulnerability, power, and resilience of our bodies beyond our vulnerability to disease and death. It led me to think and interview and perform phenoms who actually did remarkable things with their bodies. Lance Armstrong, the first supermodel, Lauren Hutton, a world champion boxer, a daredevil choreographer, Elizabeth Streb, whose dancers jumped through sugar glass and from high heights. It led me to interview people whose bodies, for example, were forced to succumb to the will of the state. I traveled to Africa, to Rwanda, Uganda, and South Africa with Diana Walker, I with my tape recorder, she with her camera. Our visit took place when AIDS was infecting millions across the continent. We arrived also 10 years after the genocide in Rwanda, 2 examples of the state's power over the body. In South Africa, President Thabo Mbeki gave strong support to HIV/AIDS denialists. Diana and I visited a cemetery in KwaZulu-Natal, for example, so packed with the dead that officials were thinking of burying people on top of one another. Yet, when we asked the groundskeepers about what killed so many people, they remarked that they could not say. A preacher told us he was burying 10 people per weekend, but could not say that AIDS had killed them. In Uganda, on the other hand, experiments with innovative practices to raise awareness were taking place. Rather than dismissing, for example, traditional healers, collaborations between traditional healers and practitioners of Western medicine were happening. After all, traditional healers had credibility and trust in villages and communities. We went to a forest of one such group, and here we are, for example, being welcomed to the forest by the traditional healers. And here you see their classroom in the forest. I was introduced to one of the leaders. I was introduced to a shaman. I was asked if I would like to be blessed. Of course, I said yes. I didn't know that the blessing meant getting spat on by mouthfuls of banana beer. Diana almost fell into a creek while she was taking that picture. She laughed so hard. Let's applaud Diana while we're right here looking at a picture like that. Samantha Power and journalist Elizabeth Newfer, the late Elizabeth Newfer, piqued my interest in Rwanda. Samantha had said to me, "You're talking about the body, you got to go to Rwanda." So Diana and I arrived in Rwanda during the Gacaca trials, some of which led to the release of Hutus accused of massacring Tutsis, the release from prison. And you can see here in this photograph that the prisoners were required to dress in pink. We went to some of the camps, prison camps, at the time that Hutu prisoners were waiting to have a chance to go to the families that they had massacred and to ask them for forgiveness. Probably like we talk about in our restorative justice. I met Ingrid and Emma when she was in her teens. She was 6 years old during the genocide, and this is word for word of a recorded interview of Ingrid and Emma. I sorrow. Okay, so I was 6 years old, 6.5, going to 7 years old, and I had been with my family, and when the genocide started, we were, separated so that we can go in different areas, not even when you get killed, it's not everyone at the same time. So I was with my sister. My sister was 10 years old. We had lost everyone by that time, and we were in the maize plantation. We were just, hiding there because, when you go there, the birds would fly and they sent dogs and we heard them bark at us. And right when the dogs came, we heard a crowd of people running after us. And when they came, everyone ran their own way. I ran my own way, and my sister ran her own way, and everyone else ran their own way. We didn't say, "Come with me," or, we didn't have time for that. And so I lost my sister. And I went on my own. I was 6 years old, and I ran and I ran. It was, the night was already falling, and I couldn't see anyone. It was raining. It was very cold, and I sat under a tree. I felt like, I'm alone. I'm completely alone. There's no one with me. I could not take care of myself. That's why I say it was God who was taking care of me. Yeah. I was alone except for a big, higher power that was washing over me. I wasn't the fastest because everyone ran, and some people were killed, but I don't know, just protected by something I couldn't see. Yeah. And that night I wandered and I wandered. I said, I am alone in these bushes. So I started walking in the road, in the streets, the real streets. And there were roadblocks there. And then they would see me and say, "This kid is Tutsi." And I could not say anything. I was so afraid, and I kept walking. And I found my sister that evening. And we were at a place where they had stopped people and they were taking people to be killed. And she was one of them and I was one of them. And they were like, take her, she's going to be killed. So they were taking us to a mass grave. So what they did, they would line you up. They would, you would make a line and they would, cut your head and throw you in the grave. Or they would kill you from there and carry the bodies to the grave. But that time, we were lining up, and right when they wished my sister like she was the next to be killed, they were like, "You know what? We're tired. We're just gonna go home and you kids, you just go. You'll be killed by sorrow." That's how they say it, and they let us go. And I said, You'll be killed by who? And Ingrid said, by sorrow, by hurt, by pain. We had witnessed, like 50 people getting killed. You would really think that we would be killed by sorrow, by hurt, by pain, so they let us go. I had 2 parents and a brother and 4 sisters. My parents and my brother are dead. My whole sisters are alive in me. And just the other day I was thinking, there was this uncle I used to think that he's my paternal uncle, but he's really not. And I found out a few weeks ago that not even one person in my father's family was alive. Not even one person, yeah. One day we were in a kind of foresty place. This man comes running, and people come running after him. And the whole group, like maybe, I don't even know, a very big group is running after him. Me and other kids run after we run with them just to see. And like a few minutes later, they catch up with him and catch him. And the guy is like, saying, forgive me, and all these things. And, they're like 100, and everyone is shouting. They don't make sense. And the first person takes a stone and and throws it at him, and that's the first that's the first one, and the second, and then the third, and then I don't even know, and the guy's really screaming, and oh my God, oh no, if I was looking at the guy, or if I was hiding, behind my hands, but they stoned him until the guy wasn't crying anymore, till the guy died, and there was like a little mountain of rocks on the guy. He had screamed from the first. Can you imagine how many stones can kill a man? Oh my God. I looked at these people and I was like, who are these people? And I didn't see, a face of a dog or a face of like a weird, mean animal. I saw like a man, it's only a man that can do such a thing. And, I don't know. I really don't know. I just saw a man killing another man just because of what they think he is, what they think this man has that they don't like, or I don't even know that is something that he has they don't like. I just think that it's, I don't know. It's not thinking at all. They're not thinking. They're just doing things, because if they thought, I'm sure they would stop. And the hearing, the screaming, if they think about the screaming, they will stop. I don't know. So, yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah, it was, yeah. And I said, that seems more disturbing to you than the killings at the mass grave, away, Ingrid. It's way more disturbing than the killings at the mass grave, because, I don't know, it's just, killing a man with stones takes time. And when you have time, you have time to think, You can't think when you're cutting someone's head off. Maybe you will realize what you've done after the person has died, or if you're shooting them, you realize after the bullet has gone. But stoning someone until they die, it takes time. And this guy was screaming. The guy was wailing. It stays in your mind. Right now. I'm at Stanford, and I'm learning. I'm learning a lot. I hope I become a doctor in the future, and I'm learning a lot of science, but also I'm learning how to think, and I'm learning how to hear, how to listen, and how to understand. And I'm learning about myself, my best self, and my worst self. I'm learning about other people, and I'm learning also about my source, Rwanda and Africa, away from it. One theme in Let Me Down Easy was grace. The film director, Mike Nichols, came to see a version of the play and said, this play is about grace. Well, that's what I thought he said. What he really said was, this play is about kindness. He said kindness, I heard grace. And I immediately started asking people about Grace, and so I asked Ingrid if Grace had helped her get through the massacre. Grace. Grace. Well, I'm not really sure that what you mean by grace is what I mean by grace. For example, when you ask me, did you forgive the people who killed your parents? I say, I forgave them. But that's not really true, because forgiveness is something you give when you ask for it. You know, when someone says, forgive me, you will forgive them. But I gave them grace. I released them. I say, do you know what? You're fine. You know, I release you. If you come and ask for my forgiveness, I'm ready to give it. I'm ready to forgive you. It's ready for you to come and take it. But in the meantime, right now, you're very oblivious, and they don't recognize what they've done. And they're still wronging me. So right now, I just give you grace. I say, I release you. You know, you're just not... I'm not holding on to you in my heart. That's what I call grace. Ingrid and Emma. I tried to imagine what Ingrid was like at 6 years old. I met her when she was a student at Stanford. So I don't know. However, Diana took so many pictures of children, and I think that maybe 6-year-old Ingrid may have looked something like this before the genocide started. What does it take to eradicate all of what is human? What does it take in those big ways? And what does it take in our everyday lives to look at each other like things? Our translator, Gabriel Gabiro, had a bit of wisdom about that, and I wanted to share that with you, Gabriel Gabiro. And this is called And Women Are Tutsi. Yeah, there was always a belief in Rwanda that Tutsi women were much more prettier than their Hutu counterparts. And this was also from history from colonialists. When Belgians came in, they said Tutsis were not Bantu. They said Tutsis were Hamites, originally from the north of Africa, who came down as nomads. Yes, I am Tutsi, but we're all Rwandans now. But anyway, well, Hutu politicians were calling on people to kill Tutsis and that sort of thing. You would be surprised to notice that most of them actually had Tutsi wives. That big politicians did not kill their wives, but they advised most other people to kill their wives, to kill anything Tutsi. So there were many other cases whereby people gave away their own wives. They handed them to militias to kill, or in cases where they did not have their wives anymore, they handed over their kids because they told them that nothing with Tutsi blood was to survive. There is documented evidence, cassettes and all of that, of politicians calling for Hutu men to have their chance to see what a Tutsi woman is like. And this, of course, encouraged the rape, mass rape everywhere. It was a chance for every militia to take on, to have what most people had always thought to be a special sort of possession. It was every man's turn, every militia's turn to sort of have access to that privilege, as they say. So like they say, there is a phrase in Rwanda that they always say that watches are Swiss, cars are German, and women are Tutsi. Watches, cars, women. We all live in those extremes to some extent. So what happens When people become things, what is the extreme? Diana and I visited a mass grave in Rwanda, and were shown rooms and rooms and rooms full of corpses. Let Me Down Easy was about the ways in which bodies are vulnerable, but also about their resilience, and also about grace and the possibility of kindness. And I asked people what they thought the title, Let Me Down Easy, meant. Here's Reverend James Cone. Some of y'all met him in my first lecture. Let me down easy. You know, those are words. Those are words of a broken heart. They can be interpreted as broken love. Let me down easy. It's about love broken. Don't do it too harshly. Don't do it too mean. Let it be easy. But as most people realize, most of that black love songs and blues and jazz is a transmutation of about injustice too, but it's covert. It's covert, not overt. And it's a combination of talking about love and at the same time talking about hurt from broken love, broken heartedness, and at the same time talking about hurt that's happening to you in society. People need something to sustain them in times of difficulty. Whether that's personal, whether that's social, they need, that's something within that you can't always explain. That's something within you that is a kind of affirmation of you. And it enables you to know who you are and be at peace with who you are, at ease with who you are, no matter what's happening around you, and no matter what you're gonna face. Ingrid had that something within you. That was Reverend James Cone, by the way. Ingrid had that something within you that is a kind of affirmation of you. I reached out to her before performing this material about this lecture, and she sent me photographs of herself and her family, where she lives now in Montreal. Here's Ingrid. And she sent me pictures of her babies. Ingrid's little girls are 6 and 4. In an email exchange that came with the photos, Ingrid wrote, "I'm going to be a neuroscientist soon. I'm defending my doctoral thesis in neuroscience at McGill at the end of June. Wish me luck, that it all goes well, because it feels daunting right now." Good luck, Ingrid. Right before we left Africa, I saw images while I was packing on a television with the sound down of floods, and I thought there was another disaster in Africa. Well, it was actually what had happened in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, and so I went to New Orleans, and luckily Diana was available to come with me there too, and she took this photograph and another photograph that you're going to see. One person that I met in New Orleans after Katrina was Dr. Kirsta Kurtz-Burke, a 34-year-old physician. Kirsta, white, educated at Barnard, was working in the former Charity Hospital in New Orleans, said to have been the oldest hospital for poor people in America. Kirsta was a real people lover who loved beyond the people inside of her picket fence, metaphorically, inside of her family. She loved beyond the familiar. She loved beyond the similar. How perfect of a person to include in Let Me Down Easy. And this third lecture, presented in my role as the 73rd Mellon lecturer, is dedicated to Dr. Kirsta Kurtz Burke. Kirsta, a heavy sense of recognition. You have people that start out assholes, and they end up assholes. And they may even wind up bigger assholes, because the biggest asshole I ever met in my training experience, God, there's so many. God, it is so. Oh, I know. I remember him. Oh, shit, I can't remember his name. But he was such an asshole. He was a resident when I was a medical student. He was in OBGYN, and he was one of these guys who was like, I can't wait to get out of Charity Hospital, this freaking hellhole, blah, blah, blah. Because, people come in with their own racism and their own classism. And, I always thought that we had a tremendous opportunity to see exactly what it was like, in some sense, without living it, to be poor and to open your mind and open your heart to these fantastic people coming into the hospital. But he was constantly talking about, well, when I get out, I'm not going to have these kind of patients. Translation, poor, black, prenatal care, no prenatal care, blah, blah, blah. One night we were on call, and a young woman came in with pelvic inflammatory disease. So we were called to the emergency room, and it's tremendously painful to be examined when you have fulminant pelvic inflammatory disease, and she was 13. And she was there with an aunt, but her aunt was not in the room. In fact, I think if I remember right, this guy made her aunt leave the room. And he did a pelvic exam on her, and she was in so much pain and crying out. And he said to her, now I want to get this right. He said, "What's your problem? Don't tell me that you haven't had something bigger than these two fingers up there, or you wouldn't have gotten this to begin with." I mean, he was my resident. So, here I was. I was a medical student. I was a third-year medical student, and he was a second-year resident, so he was many levels above me. I was so shocked and crestfallen. I would really beat myself up afterwards that I didn't, punch him, whatever. But I did say to him after we were out of her earshot, I cannot believe that you would treat someone like that. I cannot, this is disgusting to me. And he said, and I remember this, he said to me, which is kind of like the typical line, "Oh, wait and see when you're in my spot." They come in with their baggage about Charity Hospital, or the charity population. That's a kind of a common phrase. Our population, meaning the people we take care of and are distancing ourselves from. And if I say one thing, something I really loved about being at Charity, it was I always thought in my mind, so many of the people that come through these doors, they have been given the shit end of the stick in life. Period. But you know what? In my interaction with them, I can treat them like they're the Saudi Arabian princess coming to the Mayo Clinic. There is no reason that I can't provide the absolute top of the line, best medical care for them. And I think that was a very difficult thing. When things deteriorated in the hospital during Hurricane Katrina, and we were the last ones to be evacuated because that veneer just fell, that veneer that you can take care of poor people and you can take care of them as well as you can take care of rich people. Those walls came down. One of my patients said to me, he had already heard from family members that he lost his grandmother and his aunt. It was from the 9th Ward, family had gotten out, but he heard from family members that he lost his grandmother and his aunt. I mean, the water came up 10 feet an hour in their house. And he was just really grieving, pretty young guy, like in his 40s, and he had a spinal cord injury, and so he was pretty immobile, like almost all my patients, very immobile. And he was just laying in bed, and I just went in, and we were talking, and just sitting by his bedside, and, it's 106 degrees, there are no lights. We're reduced to feeding people very small portions. And, I think I tried to keep a kind of stiff upper lip, those first couple of days, cheery outlook with the patient. Hey, we're going to get out here. Don't worry about it, blah, 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 blah. And I think we were all just so exhausted. And I just remember sitting by his bed, and he said, Dr. K, have all the patients in the private hospitals gotten out? And I said, yeah. You know what? They have. And he said, do you think we're going to get out today? Now, this is already going on 5 days. And I said, I look out, the sun is setting. They've given us a lot of promises about coming, but I see the sun is setting, and I think we're going to be here another night. I said, I think we have to be prepared for that. And I said, I don't know. We might be here more than one night. I really don't know. And he said, well, do you think they're eventually going to come for us? I said, I just don't really know. And that made me feel just so crappy, or ashamed a little bit, like ashamed to be taking care of people and not to be able to do for them, which I wanted to do, which is to get them hell out and to get them to a safe place, because it's like, the patients at Charity, they're not dumb. The nurses at Charity, they're not dumb. They knew we were going to be the last ones out. They knew that the private hospitals were going to get private helicopters, and, it wasn't a shock to anybody, but the fact that it wasn't a shock to people was so shocking to me. And you just see the desperation of being poor in this country, and in some ways the distrust, the deep down, that this is not the first time this has happened to people. I'm privileged, and this is the first time that I have ever been totally fucking abandoned by my government, right? But it wasn't the first time for my patients or the nurses or the other people who worked at Charity Hospital. And I have a lot of history with the people on the floor. We all, a lot of them knew me since I'm a medical student, and 100% of our nurses on the floor are African American. And what was really interesting to me early on was that the African American nurses and the other people, the other employees at Charity, early on said two things to me, which was, one, they opened the levees on us, meaning that they let the water go in the poor parts of Orleans Parish so that it wouldn't flood the other parts. And the other thing that the people said to me early on was, they're not going to come and get us. We're going to be stuck here. And here I am, coming from my privileged position in the world. Well, of course, what do you mean? They're going to come and get us. What do you mean? Of course. FEMA knew that we were here. We were in constant contact with FEMA. What do you mean they're not going to come and get us? And our patients really did sense. And that part made me ashamed. And I thought, it must be like this your whole life. You know what? We're just going to have to do for ourselves because nobody's going to come and get us. And that constant feeling of abandonment. Whereas for me, this was all new. Being abandoned? This was all new. But to so many people, it was just another thing. It was just another example of how they were abandoned. And people went about their business. Every nurse on our floor, they never stopped working. They worked for 6 days in that heat with no power, with flashlights. They never missed a vital sign. They never missed a urine output. They never missed a trick. And, you know, it was just a heavy sense of resignation and that facade that I always tried to, you know, that kind of that facade of, oh, you're here at Charity Hospital, but don't worry, you're going to get the best possible care. It was like, well, that was gone. Because you know what? We are going to give you the best possible care, but we can't make the government and FEMA come and get us. Kirsten Kurtzberg. Kirsta died this year, and I emailed her husband, Justin Lundgren, to ask how I might best refer to her having passed while presenting this lecture. And this is what he emailed me. Suicide is such a big problem right now, especially for female physicians and healthcare workers in general. I have no problem with you saying something to the effect, regrettably, Kirsta died by suicide recently at age 55 after a years-long struggle to overcome her dependence on the drug Klonopin. My kids and I have been very open about the issues that led to her death and want to do our little part to destigmatize suicide. Let us applaud again. It's usually moments of silence, but let us applaud again for this deep lover of human beings, Kirsten Kurtzberg. Ruth Katz, patient, Yale New Haven Hospital, that bedrock of care. I'm in a pretty unique position, but despite that unique position, I certainly felt I had to look out for myself and make sure that things were done in a way that I thought they should be done. That bedrock of care was there for me. I don't think it's there for every patient, as we've talked about. I had a surgeon and an oncologist and a group of nurses in the oncology clinic and technicians down in the radiation therapy unit and a therapeutic radiologist, all of whom gave me as much time as I needed to go through whatever questions I had and otherwise to be supportive in whatever way I felt I needed at the time. I got to spend a lot of time with these people. They gave me home numbers, which I never would have abused and didn't. Only called Barbara when I was running a certain fever that she wanted to know about. Whenever I talked to them, I felt that no question was stupid. But I've come to learn enough about the healthcare system that while I think that doctors and nurses and institutions, even as wonderful as Yale is, make mistakes, have their attention diverted to other important tasks, and can't be there for you in every way that you want them to be there. As much faith as I have in this place, every time I got chemotherapy and I had a friend there with me, I'm not married, to make sure that that bag of chemotherapy with that stuff in there that they were about to pump into me was exactly what I was supposed to get, no more, and the right stuff. I will tell you that when I was on the last, well, throughout the protocol, if your temperature went above 101.2, they wanted you to call. And if it went high enough, they wanted you to come into the hospital and make sure nothing was wrong. Mine at one point had gone up to close to 102. So I came in and they admit you immediately to the oncology unit. and a oncology fellow, which is not a member of our full-time faculty, but someone who's in training here specializing in oncology, came into my room. I want to apologize, but we can't find your records. Could you tell me what kind of cancer you have? I said, this is appalling. He said, no, hey, it's not just you. That happens here quite a bit. I said, I am appalled for every patient that comes on this unit. And I had to go through, from the beginning, my whole story. Eventually, I'll tell you as an aside, eventually I knew, I could tell by his questions, he was going to get to the question of, do you work? And I've never advertised my position around here. I just want to be treated like everybody else. And he said, do you work? You know, midway through his questions. And I said, I do. He said, you working full time? I said, I am. He said, where are you working? I said, I'm associate dean at the medical school. And he said, now he looks up. Now he looks up. And he said, at this medical school? I said, at the Yale School of Medicine. He found my files within a half an hour. Ruth Katz. Is anybody in this room old enough to remember Governor Ann Richards? Applaud if you do. So this is the late Governor Ann Richards, former governor of Texas, and this is called Chi. But let's talk about something else, Anna, that I think is really important to say to you. I have two choices every day when I get up. I can feel good or I can feel bad. And a whole lot of what I feel is in my brain. So if I tell myself this is going to be a great day and I know live one day at a time by now, then it's a better day. But if I tell me I am not going to buy into a sickness life. So when I get up in the morning, I say to myself, this is going to be a good day. And even when it isn't, it's better. Because I am conscious that what I think has a whole lot to do with how I feel. Well, no, I was not the first woman governor of Texas. In the 1920s, there was Pa Ferguson, who was governor, and Pa was married to Ma. And Pa got impeached, and Ma became governor. Now, she was the one, when asked about bilingual education, who said, if the English language was good enough for Jesus Christ, it's good enough for everybody. In cancer, you have a team. I have a surgeon, I have an oncologist, I have a radiologist, and there's just so much collaboration about your case. You know, everybody knows everything about your case. Those glorified God doctors are gone, thank heaven, thank heaven. Dr. Cox told me that I'm the first person in the world with esophageal cancer to get both proton therapy and chemotherapy at the same time. And I'm sure it's big money. But I don't know. You see, I have so much insurance. And if one of them doesn't cover it, then another one will, and another one will. It's lots of money, I am sure. But I mean, do you think most of the people in this country, they couldn't get what I have? They just don't have that level of coverage. I am just so lucky. And the first thing I said was, thank God I can afford to do this. My daughter, Ellen, has managed the whole thing for me so that I don't have to use up my chi doing that. Well, that's what it is. That's your lot. That's your life force. And you have to have every ounce of it to fight this physical thing that you have. I go to this woman, and she does what's called energy work with me. Isn't it wonderful? And I just go for a tune-up. So I was telling her one day that I just had a hell of a day. A guy had come in and just had to see me that day. No, just a friend. It needed some advice, and it couldn't wait. But, there's also something about being indomitable, Anyway, so he left, and another guy came up, and he was there, and I had to drive way the hell out to the north of town to do something. And by the time I got to her, I was really whipped. And she said, "Ann, you are using up your chi. You're giving it away to all these other people, and you have to save your chi. That's your mantra from now on." Today's an exception I'm giving you. It's my natural instinct to just give everything I've got. Well, I can't do that now because I have to save what I can to beat this physical thing. But I've been good, Alan, tell him. Tell him, Alan, tell him. I've been good. People call me up, I say, "I can't talk to you right now. You're using up my chi." And they put me on a regimen. I can't shake hands. I can't hug. People made assumption of you today. I can't do all the things I did to be governor. I just can't do it. And I just say to people, "I'm so sorry I can't shake your hand. I'm on chemotherapy." People get too close, step back. I would love for you to meet my oncologist. Her name is Dr. Phan. She's Vietnamese. And I said, "Well, Dr. Phan, do you have children?" She said, "No, I'm married to this hospital. You're my girl." What could be better than that? And the minute you see her too, you're gonna know she's married to the hospital. They assigned her to me. I think they kind of hand-picked the doctors that will work best with the patients. I don't think I have any Republicans on my team. The late Governor Ann Richards. So I'm going to end in South Africa with another lover of people. We're in South Africa, and there's a beautiful photograph of these boys are dancing in the Indian Ocean. And Trudy Howell was a white South African who was the director of Chance Orphanage, which took care of children whose parents had died of AIDS and who were also often infected. And here are some of the newly arrived babies at Chance Orphanage. Trudy Howell. Last year we had about, I think, 4 or 5 babies, children who passed away. And this year we've had 1 so far. What happens is they phone me any time of the night and say, "This little kid is very, very sick." And I'll sit with the child until the child passes away. So I make sure I'm here for every child. And they don't know death. They don't know, to me, that I see it, the way I see it, that's how I see it. They don't know. They don't know that they're dying. They just feel very sick type of thing. And the older children that we've got here, the 12-year-old and the 14-year-old that we've got here, I sit and I talk with them the whole time about death. And we had one child, Nomza, that was here. Charlene Hunter-Gold from CNN knew Nomza very, very well. And I sat with Nomza for days and hours and telling about the virus and telling about death. And she knew that she was not going to make the weekend. So she came to see me on the Friday afternoon, and she said to me that her mother had visited her the night before. Now, I knew that Nomza's mother had passed away about 6 years prior to that. And so I sat her down and I said to her, now, what time did your mother visit you? She said, no, it was late at night. So I said, well, I'm so glad that your mother visited you. If you see your mother tonight again, if she comes and visits you again, you must tell her, I said, thank you very, very much that I could look after you for so long. And she said, no, she will. The next morning, the Saturday morning, I came in here, and Nomza was sitting on the stairs. And she said, no, Mother visited last night again. And her mother said that she must pack all her clothes. She's coming to fetch her. She's going home. And I promise you it was. And I walked up to her and I said to her, listen, did you tell your mother I said thank you very much? And she said, yes. And my mom says thank you very much. When I got into her room, all her clothes were packed, was in plastic bags, and it was waiting for her. That Sunday morning, about 3 o'clock in the morning, Nomza passed away. And I made sure I bury her next to her mommy. And so her mother came and fetched her, and she was prepared for it. She knew she was going to die. But she just knew that she was going to die, and it's not a bad thing. And she was prepared. She was prepared to go. All her stuff was packed. All her teddy bears were packed. And we took everything, her clothes, her teddy bears, everything, and we put it in her coffin. So she went very happily. 12 years old. I just tell them that there's different stages of life, I say to them, you get born, and sometimes when you're born, you're sick. And you've got this germ in your body that makes you very sick. And we talk about the germ, and we play with the dolls. I sit on the carpet and I play with them, with the dolls. I say, this is this ugly germ, and it's got into the body, and it's making this little child very sick. And sometimes this child has had enough, and then what happens is, and then we start talking about death, you're getting sicker, and this is the next stage. And they ask questions like, what happens when I'm dead? And I just say to them, nobody can answer that. And then they ask about God, and then they ask about, can I come back and visit you again after I'm dead? They always just want to say, can we come back to Chance Orphanage after we date? That type of thing. So I say to them, you'll always be in my heart, even if you passed away. You always in my heart. You always with me. So, in any case, don't leave them in the dark. Don't leave them in the dark. The story of Nomza is told by Trudy Howe. Will you please help me thank Diana Walker for these incredible images? Mallory, make her come up here. Mallory, make her come up here. Diana Walker. Chasing that which is not me, chasing that which is me. This ends lecture number 3. Thank you so very much.